counsel. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. Ms. LaViolette, the jurors have some questions for you.
All right.
I'm going to ask them in the order they were submitted by the jury.
Okay.
You stated that you read journal entries done during the time Jodi was with Travis. Did you read entries from any earlier time frames?
No, I didn't. I read very limited information prior to the journals I read during the time frame they were together. So that would be from 2006 through 2008.
If you had read entries from the earlier time frame, do you feel it may have given you a better picture of Jodi?
I read a lot of information from her family and her prior boyfriends. So I read things other than her journal prior to that. So I felt like I had a pretty good picture of Jodi as viewed by other people.
Did you read or view any interviews involving Travis's friends and family?
I saw the 7 hours of unedited footage from 48 Hours Mystery, but other than that, I think I read one email from his sister directed to him, but no, I didn't, other than that.
What did you learn about Travis?
What did I learn about Travis? I learned from reading his what he wrote in his book and some of his blog that he was a motivational speaker, that he was quite good at it, that he was a man who knew his scriptures, that he was a man who came from an incredibly abusive background in childhood, that his survival as a child was tough, that he was, according to him, made fun of because he was unable to bathe sometimes, that he and his siblings were subjected to verbal, emotional, physical abuse and neglect. I learned that he was attractive to women and that he was able to, appeal to numbers of women. I don't know much about his friendships because I didn't really hear him talk about his friendships. I know that he had friendships with the Hughes, both the Hughes, and that was a 5-year friendship, and that during that time they were concerned about the way he treated women. And I learned about his anger from his own words and also from the way he talked to Miss Arias, to Jodi. I learned something about the way he talked to women in general in private. So I'm not sure if that fully answers it or not.
Do you think that Jodi could have lied to you to help her case?
When I first met Jodi, she was very protective of Mr. Alexander, and
Overruled, you may continue.
She had a very hard time looking at herself as a battered woman, saw herself as, it takes two to tango kind of thing. And so I was, I've been involved in other cases where people sort of try to convince me about who they are and what's happened to them, and I never found that to be true with Jodi. And then in reading from men who had lived with her and spent a great deal of time with her, she was never described in any way as lying. I know that, she lied in high school, but I don't actually, or kept things from her parents, I should say. I don't know that she lied directly, but kept things from her parents, and I find that very typical of teenagers. So I didn't find that unusual. And frankly, I don't find it unusual for people to lie when they do things that are abhorrent in their own lives. The Archbishop of New York was just caught lying, and the Lance Armstrong lied over many years, and Bill Clinton lied, and people lie when they are afraid, and they are afraid of the repercussions to their own lives, to their careers, to their image, and probably a lot of us have lied about something far less serious than killing someone. So,
All right, Ms. LaViolette, could Jodi have exaggerated to help her case?
she could have exaggerated. I actually did not find that she was a person who did exaggerate. She tended to minimize more than exaggerate, and it took a while before I got information from her, even about the incidents. She would tend to describe them as less than and as not happening all the time. So I found that more to be true with Jodi.
Is it possible friends and family may have embellished in an effort to help her?
I guess, except that friends and family didn't seem to go overboard, and a lot of what I read were Mr. Alexander's words directed at her, the way he talked to her, the kind of disrespect that was there, the kind of, when I looked at the escalation process, I didn't find that what her friends and family said, it seemed pretty even-handed. I mean, they didn't just say, gee, she's this wonderful person. They made statements about her in other ways as well. So it wasn't just trying to paint her with a white brush.
What did you discover about Travis when looking at emails, texts, and instant messages to other women?
Mr. Alexander tended to push sexual limits. He would start to talk to somebody, and he would start making sexual kind of innuendos to people and see where that would go, and then when it opened the door. He also, with some women, was trying to push PPL on them. If they joined PPL, he got credits in that direction. I learned that he was very good with women. He sort of read them and read the women he was with, but he also irritated women. And what I mean by that is there were some women he pushed fast on, faster than they wanted. He would back off. So he had a sense about, for a lot of these women, I think, about playing them, how to play them. And I think he did that pretty effectively. And I think oftentimes, or with some of the women who shared his faith, because he was so well-versed, or apparently so well-versed in his faith and the scriptures and whatever, he was able to sort of insinuate his way into their confidence with that also. And he was able to, on paper, empathize with them. One of the women was someone who said that her husband was, not somebody who let her have friends or let her be around other men, and he would tell her to go to the bishop and that wasn't right, and he shouldn't treat her that way. And there was another woman who said that she was with her ex-husband, was emotionally and verbally abusive to her and addicted to pornography, and he was empathetic and would be empathetic with those women. So there was a real dynamic about, getting, sort of insinuating himself into those relationships. Now, I only have emails in particular and written information from about somewhere around December of 2007 to June of 2008. So I don't have a lot of information prior to that.
Is it common for women in abusive relationships to snap and commit violent acts against long-standing perpetrators?
Actually, usually what we find is that women, when they snap in a lethal way, that it's been a self-defense kind of situation.
Sustained.
And I ask that her comment be stricken.
Yes, the comment is stricken. You may approach. With regard to the last question, can you answer that question yes or no without elaborating? And again, that question is whether it is common for women in abusive relationships to snap and commit violent acts against long-standing perpetrators.
It's not easy to answer in a yes or no, Your Honor.
We have heard multiple times from the defense the terms survivor and victim used together. Is it possible for the survivor to be the perpetrator?
Is that a yes or no?
It is a yes or no. Do you need to elaborate?
Yes.
You may.
It's very possible for somebody to lash back. In fact, there's a term for it Michael Johnson uses. It's called violent resistance. So that when someone has been a victim of domestic violence, they sometimes hit back. And that would be more the usual form that I would see, that there might be somebody yelling back, there might be somebody hitting back, there might be somebody, doing something on that order. Most of the time, what I see in terms of violent resistance might be an explosion that would be more like hitting or yelling, that sort of thing. Screaming at somebody. So in that way, it could be physical and it could be violent because that person could hit that other person back. I have rarely, in my experience, I haven't seen it with much with a weapon.
We have seen and heard that Jodi has kicked her mother, slapped her mother, has been angry with her mother, and even called her sister stupid. Would this characterize Jodi as an abuser?
I believe that happened when Jodi was a teenager, and what I would characterize that as a very angry teenager. I certainly wouldn't characterize that, and calling your sister stupid, that's not uncommon. Kicking your mother, hitting your mother, I don't approve of that. I don't think that's a great thing to do. I think teenagers do a lot of things that, unfortunately, I don't think are great things to do. And I know she has anger with her mother, and I know that's been part of their history. But I haven't seen her, at least as an adult, I haven't seen any evidence that there's been physical violence with her mother.
Why would a perpetrator be abusive in one relationship but not another?
Partially because it depends on the level of intimacy that somebody has. What I've seen, and specifically with Mr. Alexander, is that most of his relationships weren't long-term. And so it usually takes a period of time before you see physical violence and real emotional violence happen. There's a progression with that. And so you wouldn't see that happening right away. And even in what you would call not a long-term relationship, for instance, with Lisa Andrews, which was more intimate, I think next to Miss Arias, the relationship with Miss Andrews was the most intimate. And she talks about feeling disrespected in that relationship, which was fairly short, and they broke up 3 times. The other relationships, and there were some where women said that they didn't like how he talked or whatever, even in those relationships, they were for the most part, via some kind of, the internet or IMs or that sort of thing. It's really not very difficult to be non-aggressive with somebody you're not spending much time with. So where we tend to see that aggression really happen is when people have more time together, they have more that there is to argue about or to have conflict about, and then it's how they handle that conflict after that. So for most of the folks that I've worked with, they may have a relationship that's less aggressive than another one, but the more intimate, and for some of the fellows I talk to, it's the person that they're most connected to that they wind up being the most abusive to.
Have you ever seen situations where victims kill their partners because they see no other way out?
I've worked on one case where that was true. I've worked with lots of battered women, and there have been...
Objection, lack of foundation, one case.
Sustained.
Lack of foundation, one case.
Well, Judge Person?
You may approach. Is it conceivable that a woman could kill her partner just to get away from the abuse?
Is it conceivable?
Is it conceivable?
I would say that it is conceivable but rare.
Have you seen relationships in which abuse has escalated on both sides, where the individuals are both victim and perpetrator?
Generally speaking, with domestic violence, that does not stay at that level. And the latest research that's come out in heterosexual relationships says that when men and women are both being violent with each other, that over time the male partner tends to get more violent than the female. But I have seen situations where both people were violent with each other. Yes, I have.
Is it possible that Travis and Jodi were in this type of relationship?
It doesn't appear that way to me because I don't see any evidence of it, even in the verbal confrontations. You don't see Jodi Arias escalating the situation. You see her trying to calm the situation. So I don't have any evidence that that's true. I don't have any evidence that there's been physical intimidation. And the other part is when I look at domestic violence, part of what I look at is the element of fear in that relationship. And so I don't see as much the fear or the behaviors to try to adjust to the other person. Mr. Alexander tends to be the one that is escalating and getting really aggressive, and Miss Arias tends to be the one that's sort of trying to slow the process down. So I don't have evidence of that. And in her prior...
Beyond scope.
Overruled. You may complete your answer.
In her prior two relationships, there's no evidence whatsoever in these long-term relationships that she has been violent or aggressive or jealous. Both partners say that that is not part of her history.
If Jodi slapped and kicked her mother in the past, could she be seen as a perpetrator?
She could definitely be seen as someone who kicked and hit her mother in the past. I would want to know, once again, when I look at perpetrators, I'm looking at power differences, and what I'm talking about in this relationship is the relationship between two peers, between people who are in an intimate relationship.
Sustained. Because of possible consequences, do you feel it is possible that Jodi could be exaggerating abuse events?
I think anything's possible. When I look at the kind of escalation that I've seen with Mr. Alexander, and when I listen to what his friends, the Hughes, have said, it is very difficult for me to believe that.
Could Jodi and Travis, for example, fit somewhere around the high conflict and abuse columns in your matrix, but then by exaggerating events, make it appear that they as a couple lean more toward battering and terrorism?
Actually not, and I'll tell you why. It's because, and if you look at the emails, it's the kind of names and put-downs and the length of time that they go on. It's that kind of thing. You don't fit into high conflict. High conflict suggests a balance of power, and they might say things to each other, and they might not be respectful. But this goes way beyond that when you look at what's said in these instant messages and texts. It's absolutely, to me, abhorrent and would be considered absolutely psychological verbal abuse in a battering kind of range and not in an abusive kind of range. It goes past that.
How does it affect your assessment when you do not have the whole story from both individuals?
Oftentimes, and particularly when you're working on a murder case, you don't have the story. And by the way, for the most part, an expert...
No responses. How it affects it.
She's still answering the question.
Overruled. You may continue.
For the most part, an expert witness doesn't have access to the other side of the equation. But in a homicide, you definitely don't. So what you try to gather is all the information that you can, and all that's provided for you, and all that you think you need to make an assessment. So what I do is I try to get as much from the other person who's not present as I can, and I have a big box of materials at home that I have been reading through and have read through over the last year and a half. So my goal, whether it's a child custody case, whether it's a family law or a criminal case, is to get as much information as I can from both sides, because I don't want to be biased. I don't want to be just seeing one person's point of view, and so I have tried to get information to see both points of view as well.
In your opinion, is it possible that Jodi could have also been a perpetrator in her relationship with Travis?
I don't see any evidence of that. I just don't see any evidence of it. In the materials that I have access to, there is no evidence of that.
Is it possible Jodi could be guilty of psychological abuse toward Travis, given that we are not privy to the majority of their conversations?
As I said, I think anything's possible. I just don't have any evidence of it. And part of what I looked at is her prior two relationships, because when you look at longer-term relationships and the one she had with Mr. Alexander, they should be able to give you information about that kind of thing happening. And neither Mr. Brewer, who was with her for 4 years, nor Mr. McCartney, who was with her for 2, indicated in any way that she was abusive or jealous or controlling or manipulative, and in fact remained friends with her after they broke up, which is usually a good sign that they had some positive feelings for her.
Could any of Travis's actions be considered defensive rather than abusive?
Any of us can get angry, any of us can get upset, any of us can get defensive. When I look at the kind of tirades, that is beyond defensive. That is beyond defensive. That is tearing somebody's character apart, and that is not a defensive way of handling things. And it goes on way too long for it to be just a defensive way of handling things. I mean, there are some emails where he's just angry, but he tends to take it to a little bit of an extreme, even at lower levels, and then when he escalates, it's pretty darn extreme.
Can two children facing identical abuse situations end up handling those situations very differently as they become adults? Can you explain how and why?
Sure. When you grow up in the family that you grow up in, it's not just what's dealt to you, it's the way that you see what's dealt to you. And anybody who has children or grows up with siblings knows that all of your siblings can see things differently. So, for instance, if you have an accessible adult that you can really count on, like you have a friend's parent, or an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent that is there for you on a regular basis, that can change. Your personality, the way you take things in, if you blame yourself, or if you blame the parent, or if you're able to see clear of that situation. If there's a community that's set up where you have, maybe you're in a scouting troop, or maybe you go to a church, or maybe you are part of a softball team or baseball team, somewhere where you get positive things, that can have an impact. But generally, most kids, their brain development is exponential from 0 to 6. So most kids learn a lot about who they are between 0 and 6. Not that we don't keep learning, but your disposition, how you come out, your personality affects how you take things in. So there's a lot of things that can make a difference. The problem is when you learn a lot of negative things in your family of origin, if you're neglected, if you're without food, if your parents are violent with each other, that generally speaking, you're going to need some intervention to just help you in intimate relationships because you don't learn what you don't see and you don't have exposure to. You know, even if you're a strong personality.
You talked about great differences in the stories of victims versus perpetrators. Does it concern you at all that you can't get a full and complete story from Travis?
Yes, I wish I could get a complete story from Travis. And I can't. I can only take what I got from his friends and from women that he was involved with and from his own writing about his childhood, his own writing in his journals. I don't think I got a complete story. I got as complete a story as I could get, and I tried to get as complete a story as I could get.
If a person starts out a relationship with low self-esteem and does things he or she does not necessarily like or want to do, is their partner considered abusive if those dislikes are never verbalized or shared?
If a person doesn't verbalize, of course, nobody's a mind reader. You can't expect people to know what you don't tell them. But I think the difference is if you are not abusive, you still don't act abusively. And it wouldn't take much to know that being called a
Jodi Arias goes with a question, talks about the verbal.
Sustained. Sustained. We're going to move on to the next question. How quickly can abuse escalate from the first time two people meet?
It's very different. Usually, what I hear is that there's a period of time where that's not happening because most people don't get in relationships if they think somebody's going to be abusive with them. But it varies. I mean, everybody's different, and so you can see different patterns. But once you begin to see an escalation, there tends to be an ongoing escalation, and it can be like this. It doesn't have to be a straight line up at all, but usually over time what you begin to see is an escalating pattern.
Prior to Lisa Andrews and Jodi Arias, do you know who Travis Alexander's girlfriend was?
A woman by the name of Deanna.
Can you describe some details of that relationship to the best of your knowledge?
I believe that they were together on and off for 7 years. She went on a mission, so she was gone for 2 years. According to Miss Arias, he didn't really want her to go. He wanted her to stay, and she went away, and they wrote letters to each other during that time. He seemed to still really care about her. They didn't, I know they continued to have a relationship of some sort. I know that he said that he considered that he took the best 7 years of her life and that it was going to be hard for her to find a partner that she deserved, and I don't really know what that meant. I know she loaned him money for a business that he started, and that she asked for the money back. I don't know if she got it back, but they still seem to have a friendly relationship. But that's about all I know there.
A lot of your testimony has been based on what Jodi has told you. It has been proven that Jodi has lied multiple times since killing Travis. How are you able to know everything she is saying is truthful?
I'm not basing a lot of what I know on...
She's asking about the lying.
It is responsive to the question, Judge.
Let me read the question. How are you able to know everything she is saying is truthful? How are you able to know everything she is saying is truthful?
Wasn't the first part that I based it on what she said, and I was trying to address that I didn't just base it on what she said.
All right, you may continue.
Okay, I based it on...
Judge, beyond the question that she's asked, how can she, if she based it?
She's basing it on the question, the entire question that was asked.
All right, overruled, you may answer.
Okay, I didn't just base it on what Jodi told me. I based it on everything that I read, and everything that, all of the materials I've read from numerous sources. But how do I know everything she told me was true? I don't. I don't know everything she told me was true. I know that I have enough backup with the information that I got that was collateral to what Ms. Arias said to believe that she is telling me the truth about most things. And once again, that she lied after the killing of Mr. Alexander does not make her a liar. It makes her a frightened human being, like most human beings who have done something that is abhorrent to them and they have a hard time facing. So I don't think that makes her a liar. I don't get that her character prior to this event, I don't get information that says Jodi Arias is a liar from anybody.
Did you ever see any proof that Travis physically abused Jodi?
The only thing I saw was a broken finger.
Objection, lack of foundation.
Overruled.
That's what I saw, that she had a broken finger.
Isn't it possible that Jodi did not write some of those incidents in her journal because they never happened?
It's possible, although Mr. Alexander didn't write in his journal about things that he said happened either.
Sustained. According to the conflict scale, would Jodi be put in the aggressive group if she slapped and kicked her mother?
The conflict tactic scale is actually about adult relationships, so it's never been standardized or the questions were not asked to teenagers. So I can't tell you, because it's an adult scale, it's looking at people in adult relationships, and that's what conflict tactic scale is about.
Have any of your patients ever killed their partner?
Yes.
Are you able to confirm whether or not Jodi abused Travis? Would you say it was a possibility?
I just don't have any evidence of it. There's nothing I look at in her history with the other men in her life or in any of the exchanges between the two of them that would indicate to me that, that she had. I mean, there's possibilities of everything, but I don't see evidence that supports that.
Would you classify Mr. Alexander and Miss Arias' relationship as a love-hate relationship?
I would classify it as an abusive relationship.
How does a love-hate relationship impact the parties over time?
Love-hate relationships, I actually, if you were looking at my continuum, I'd see them as more high conflict. They're people that stay together, they're disrespectful to each other, they don't have a way, they don't solve problems well. So over time, they erode the friendship that they have with each other. Sometimes they come into counseling, 15 years down the road, and they really don't like each other, and they want you to perform a miracle with them. But they've stopped caring about each other. They've stopped seeing each other as friends. They see each other as enemies. But there is basically a balance of power in that relationship, and it tends to go back and forth between both people. So that's how I see that as different than an abusive relationship.
The violence level of Jodi's response to neutralize what she perceived as a threat was extreme and way beyond neutralizing the threat. In your experience, is this response consistent with what a victim of abuse would do?
My experience with females, in particular females who are victims, is that when they are afraid for their lives, they would not know when to stop. They would not know when it was enough. And actually, if you look at people who are trained in combat, like the...
Overruled. You may continue.
When you look at people who are trained in combat, like police officers or military, oftentimes when they're trained for combat and non-combat situations. And when they get in combat situations, they often go over the top, which is like excessive force or whatever. I think what's difficult is for anybody to know when to stop, when they'd be safe. And I actually, I think about that in movies. When you look at movies and you...
Sustained. Other than Jodi's word, what evidence do you have that Jodi ever received Spider-Man underwear or the pink T-shirt from Travis?
The Spider-Man underwear was part of a conversation that they had in an IM when she was traveling, and she was having an instant message with Mr. Alexander, and she told him that she would bring the Spider-Man underwear, and they were talking about that. So that's the evidence I have with that.
Has Jodi continued to write in her journal after June 4, 2008?
I haven't seen her journals after June 4, 2008. So I don't know.
Can you please provide the time frame in which you evaluated Jodi?
Just Jodi? I'm not sure if you mean Jodi or the whole case.
It says just Jodi.
I spent about 44 hours in jail with Jodi, face to face.
And time frame in terms of dates?
Oh, okay. The first visit was in October of 2011. And I spent 2 days that visit. There was another visit, I think within 3 or 4, I can't tell you exactly, that I spent another 2 days. And then I came out early before my daughter's wedding and spent a part of a day with Jodi. So it was over, I believe, 4 different visits. There were 4 different visits or 5 different visits, and I'm not exactly sure. I don't have my calendar with me. And each visit was either the first time it was 8 hours and like 6 or 7 hours, and the next time was a couple of 6 or 7 hour days, I believe. There was one time that was like 3 or 4 hours. So it was spread out a little bit.
Regarding the argument in the car between Jodi and Travis in March of 2008, you stated that Travis slapped her across the face, quote unquote. Is that exactly what Jodi told you?
No, it isn't exactly what she told me. I think it was on the jaw, but I think about that as the face. So I said slapped across the face. What was most important to me is the slap.
Sustained. Please state how confident you are that Jodi did not lie to you.
That Jodi did not lie to me about what?
Did not lie to you.
Like ever? I don't believe she lied to me about significant things. I don't have reason to believe she lied to me. I don't have evidence that supports she lied to me. Is it possible she lied to me about some things? It's possible. But when I'm looking at the issue of abuse...
It's not beyond the scope.
Overruled. You may continue.
What I came in to do was really to look at the issues of domestic violence. And when I look at the issues of domestic violence, and not this little detail or that little detail, but I'm looking at the issue of domestic violence, I found compelling evidence for domestic violence, or I would not be here.
Sustained. You described a vague connection between Mr. Alexander's childhood and his behavior. Can you describe this connection for us?
Yeah, I actually don't think it's vague at all. The most significant factor with people who are abusive in their adult relationships is they're growing up in abusive relationships. Now, a lot of people have grown up in abusive relationships, and it's kind of a matter of degree. But the worst kind of childhood abuse is usually associated with the most difficulty in having a successful intimate relationship and a non-abusive intimate relationship. And Mr. Alexander's childhood is incredibly abusive. There are situations where his father kicked the door down with him on the other side of it. He was thrown across the room. He talked about being beaten by his mother. He talked about not having food to eat. He talked about living in a camper shell. He talked about his mother being sleeping off a meth high for days and his father being gone. He talked about his father and his mother being abusive with each other. He talked about the neglect of finding a piece of moldy bread to eat, and he ate it, about being afraid to wait because...
They asked about the connection.
Sustained.
The connection is that when you are submitted and exposed to that kind of violence, you learn about survival. And in fact, it's often called, by Bruce Perry, called chronic combat readiness, that a child who grows up in that kind of situation can see threat in things that other people don't see threat in, can be hypervigilant, can be in a survival mode. And part of that survival mode is the world as it affects me. So you have to look out for yourself in that kind of situation. So there's a direct link between what you're exposed to and how you handle it, especially if there is no intervention, nobody to help you learn to handle it any differently.
In the April 2008 incident, you stated Jodi did not fight back because she did not want to hurt Travis. Are you saying she would rather lay there and possibly die than fight back?
Unless somebody believes that they're going to be hurt, or there are a lot of people who don't fight back. Either they're afraid they're really...
Other people. She's asked specifically in this circumstance. Not responsive.
Sustained. Are you saying that Jodi would rather lay there and possibly die rather than fight back?
I don't know what she was thinking. She said she didn't want to hurt him, and she knew she would have to hurt him.
Just because a person may appear to be controlling, does that automatically mean they are physically abusive?
No, it doesn't. You can have somebody who's controlling and never lays a hand on anybody, but they manipulate and psychologically control.
That should be on the scope.
She's still finishing her answer, Judge.
Sustained. Are you aware if any of Travis's ex-girlfriends besides Jodi have said Travis was physically abusive toward them?
There are no ex-girlfriends that I've read who say that Travis has been physically abusive to them.
Is it possible that the instant message between Jodi and Travis on May 10, 2008 regarding his temper was a running joke between the two of them?
It certainly didn't sound like it.
In the May 26, 2008 text messages and instant messages between Travis and Jodi, if Jodi was that upset with what Travis was saying to her, why didn't she stop talking to him right then?
Well, I don't know, except that
The checks on American Foundation, she doesn't know.
Well, she was going to explain what she did know.
You can follow up with that. Sustained. Other than Jodi, did you interview anyone else face to face?
no, I did not.
Are you aware that Jodi's grandparents' house was broken into on May 28, 2008, only 2 days after the fight they had through instant messages and text messages?
Yes, I'm aware that the grandparents' house was broken into.
We have heard of different females Travis talked to between December 2007 through May of 2008. Wasn't it a known fact between Jodi and Travis that he was trying to find someone he could marry?
It was a known fact that he was trying to find someone to marry. I just, the conversations,
Can you finish your response?
the conversations would not lead you to believe that these were trying to woo somebody or court somebody to find out if they could marry them. They were very flirtatious from the beginning, sexual from the beginning.
You stated, one person has more power than the other person. Can that be because the other person gives it rather than because the one person commands it?
Yes, it can. What I find, though, is that if you're not in a...
Overruled.
That you don't have to be abusive because somebody gives you power. Because somebody is less able to take power than the other person doesn't mean the other person has to be abusive. And frankly, if you're in a relationship that
Sustained. Have any of the women with whom Travis had a relationship, other than Jodi, stated that Travis abused them psychologically, verbally, or physically?
Lisa Andrews talked about him sort of putting her down, not respecting her values, saying that if she wanted to be a teacher, she'd probably be a good teacher, but it would suck if that's what she chose to do with her life. So there were women. There was another woman who complained that he said nobody would ever.
Who are you referring to?
Nicole, who said that
Judge, it's not necessary for her to discuss her answer.
Overruled. You may continue.
who said that Mr. Alexander,
Overruled.
that Mr. Alexander told her that no one would ever want to date her because she was like her boyfriend, that she was like the man that she ended up being with. And what seems important to me here is that these are not long relationships.
Sustained. Amid all of the interviews with family and friends of either Travis or Jodi, did anyone mention either concern or suspicion of abuse regarding Travis or Jodi?
Matt McCartney mentioned that he believed that Jodi had confided in him and that he knew there was verbal abuse by talking to Jodi, and that he suspected that there was physical abuse, but he didn't know.
You have used the term survivor several times during your testimony. Could you please define this term?
We used to use the term victim with domestic violence, and what people have started using is the term survivor because it has a more positive sound, and because people do survive these relationships, and it's a more powerful word than victim.
Could a survivor also be a perpetrator?
Yes, a survivor could be a perpetrator, but for the most part, and when I was answering that question before, there's a thing called violent resistance, where someone who is basically the victim of domestic violence lashes out. There's also a term that has been coined and is used in California, and I'm not sure if it's used here, called dominant aggressor, which is what the police department tries to look at, and that's to determine who actually is the primary offender in this relationship, who is the person with the most power in the relationship.
You stated there was nothing in Jodi's journals, emails, etc., indicating she was jealous. Wouldn't that be consistent with her belief in the law of attraction?
It could be, although she did list things about her being very depressed, about her being a shell of her former self. So although for the most part in her journal, she didn't try to list negative things came out in her journal. Negative things, some non-specific kind of negative things about Mr. Alexander being cruel or...
Sustained. Could a female abuse, batter, or terrorize a man to the point of killing him?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that.
Could a female abuse, batter, or terrorize a man to the point of killing him?
Yes, women can be perpetrators. The percentage...
It's still,
Overruled, you may continue.
When you look at something like the continuum, or you're looking at high-end battering, when you look at the National Surveys of Households and Families, which is a non-criminal justice survey, the Violence Against Women Act survey that includes 8,000 men and 8,000 women, the emergency room surveys, the FBI Unified Crime Reports, you still see overwhelmingly in violent crimes where there's...
Sustained. We keep hearing him and perpetrator in conjunction with one another, but couldn't a perpetrator be a she?
A perpetrator can be a she.
How many times did you meet with Jodi, and on what dates?
Well, I tried to answer that before, and I can't tell you the dates without my calendar. But except for the first date was, I think it was October of 2011. There was, I know, a time in August, because that's when my daughter got married, and there were 2 other times. In fact, I think when Mr. Martinez interviewed me, I met with her then. That was in November. But I'm not certain of all the dates. I would have to have my calendar.
During your testimony, you concurred that many things actually happened, such as when Travis was supposedly caught with photos of young boys. Aren't you, in fact, only basing this on what Jodi told you?
I'm basing, yes, I am basing that on what Ms. Arias told me, and on those emails, or on the sex tape when he talks about corking the pot of a young...
Lack of foundation as to how she knows this instance.
she's still answering the question, what supports her belief?
Overruled. You may follow up with that.
Corking the pot.
I'm sorry. I was sustaining the objection. I'm going to allow your attorney to follow up.
Okay.
You claim that Jodi not getting medical attention for her finger or other injuries caused by Travis is consistent with other battered women because they do not want to ruin the perpetrator's reputation or get them in trouble. What would prevent the battered person from getting medical attention and simply lying about the cause?
There are people who get medical attention and lie about the cause. If there's any suspicion and the doctor interviews, you can wind up sort of being stuck.
Overruled. You may continue.
So there are people who go to the doctor and make a report and lie. There are people who do that. I think that in this particular incident...
Sustained. You claim Travis's name-calling turned into character assassination, but my understanding is that in order for character assassination to occur, it would have to include diminishing someone's character to other people. If the name-calling was only between Travis and Jodi, wouldn't this just be considered more severe or intense name-calling and not character assassination?
No, character assassination does not have to occur in the presence of other people, and most of the time it doesn't. tearing apart somebody's character, particularly if you're spending most of your time together, you don't have another mirror of reality to look at. So if somebody's tearing apart your character, somebody's tearing apart who you are, and you love that person, they have the power to tear apart your character. Most character assassination does not happen in front of other people.
You testified that in completing a couple assessment, you talked to both parties to confirm and validate your concerns. In this case, you were only able to talk with one person. How do you validate the information presented to you is truthful in order to base an accurate decision?
By using collaborative data and looking at different things. I'm not sure if it was Mr. Alexander's blog, but there was some, I don't know, Facebook from blog, but they asked him what he liked. He said, "I don't like whores."
Section beyond the scope here, so.
Sustained. You testified that in March, when Jodi's phone voicemail box was full, Travis ordered Jodi to empty it. How do you know that he ordered her or just asked her?
Well, he said, "Empty it out," as opposed to please or whatever. So there's an implied, you empty it out there. That's how I read it.
Considering Travis and Jodi communicated frequently, wouldn't you say it is reasonable that Travis might get a bit irritated that he could not leave a message with Jodi for a week because her voicemail was full?
Sure, he could get irritated. It's not a matter of being irritated. It's a matter of what you do.
Overruled. You may continue.
It's a matter of what you do when you're irritated. It's a matter of how far you go when you're irritated. I mean, any of us get irritated. We get irritated at people we love and care about all the time. But it's sort of like, now how do I handle that? What's the pattern that I use to handle it? And anybody can get irritated. Anybody can get over the top a little bit. But it's just so far over the top. That's my concern.
Since you were hired for this case to look into Travis and Jodi's relationship to determine whether or not this was an abusive relationship, why would you not look further into Travis's text about him fearing Jodi? Do you feel this may have been important?
I continued to read the text to this particular person and to read the texts that were occurring at that time. And I didn't see anything else that would lead me to believe he was afraid, including his behavior. So when I look at the information, I also look at what surrounds the information. So I was reading text he had written to other people at the same time, and his behavior toward Miss Arias. And as I said before, stalkers do not...
Sustained. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take a 10-minute recess, but please limit it to 10 minutes. Please remember the admonition. You are excused.